ready to rock and roll. Welcome, everyone. So, my name is Jeff Smith, and as the current ACS Vice President of Membership Boards, I am pleased to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn on ACS's new professional standards scheme. First, an acknowledgement of country, if we could. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal elders from other communities who may be in attendance today. And I am from on Jar Jar Wurrung country today, part of the Kulin Nation in Victoria. So if you'd like to add your own welcome, please pop something into the chat. So I'm absolutely passionate about the ACS having a professional standards scheme and recognition from governments in law. This is something I think ACS has that sets us apart. Getting this renewed has been a big effort. We have now a 5-year approval to our scheme. It's an amazing event, amazing outcome, and it's great news for the profession, for the tech, for small business, and for certified members, of course. This session is all about helping our CP members understand what the scheme means to you and what you need to know and what you need to do. Now, I'd like to say thank you for that. And I'm going to hand over to the team. I believe we've got Rupert Grayston up first. So Rupert, I will let you explain to everyone the amazing and awesomeness things that you've done.
Jeff, thank you so much and welcome all. What we're going to hear about today, I'm Rupert Grayston. I'm Director Capability at the ACS. I oversee the Professional Standards Scheme operations, but I'm shortly going to hand over to Anna Shin, our Manager of Professional Standards Scheme, our resident expert, to walk you through the details. So what we're going to hear about today, first of all, is what a professional standards scheme is all about, to make sure that's clear to you. Secondly, what is the ACS professional standards scheme? How has it been constructed? Thirdly, exemptions. Whether you would be exempt and who would be exempt from participating or compliance requirements within the scheme. Then how does the scheme work and operate? Next, the benefits, both to yourself as an individual, to the collection of CP members, to the ACS and to the profession at large, as well as to society. Next, the professional obligations, the things that ACS needs to do and the things that individuals will need to do. And then how we're going to achieve that, the new compliance arrangements for our professional standards scheme. And plenty of Q&A time. And of course, don't hesitate to drop your questions in the chat. With that, I'm going to hand over to Anna Shin. I beg your pardon. Not quite ready. We're going to use Mentimeter today. And what I'd like you to do is just to get started on Mentimeter. So if we can roll to the next slide. What I'd like you to do is to scan the QR code in the bottom corner, and Mentimeter should come up. And what we'll get you to do is to pop a response, just to test a response on what city you're joining us from today. And I'm going to do it myself to make sure it's all working. I'm joining from Canberra. Okay, so it looks like everyone's getting started on that. This is really just a tester, so you can get into the Mentimeter. We will pop, I think somebody's going to pop the Mentimeter code into the chat, so that if you need to come back to it or reset it, you can use the Mentimeter code if the QR code isn't appearing or didn't work for you. We've got people from all over Australia and from all parts, city and regional. Welcome all. All right, we might just move on to the next slide, which is again a little bit of a practice slide, although we are interested in your responses on this. The next Mentimeter question that should pop up on your handset, on your smartphone, would be: are you an ACS certified professional member? Now, this is not a trick question, but in part, this presentation is directed at our professional standards, certified professional members, but there may be others who aren't certified professional members, in which case we need to remember to make clear what the situation is for yourself. Okay, we've got 72 CP members, 7 non-CP members present. And I think that's just about stabilizing. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to respond and has Mentimeter going. Do pop in the chat if you're having any difficulty with Mentimeter, and we can give you some clues. There will be more Mentimeter questions, a little bit more probing than these starter questions, and that will help us to get some feedback from yourselves and some ability for us to see what the profile is of those on the call. Thank you. Let's move on. I'm going to hand over now to Anna Shin, Manager, Professional Standard Schemes at ACS.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anna. Before we get started on the nitty-gritties of the Professional Standards Scheme and what it is, I thought it might just play a little clip from our regulator, the Professional Standards Councils. And it's a little clip about why being in a profession is important and what role it plays to the society at large. So you're all here as a participant in the broader IT profession, and you obviously have a very important role in the society. So let's just hear what the councils say about that. Sorry, Susan, I'm not hearing any sound.
That sound doesn't seem to be coming through.
Apologies. We did do a run session. It was working fine. I'm not entirely sure what's happening. Oh, Susan, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. We'll need to unmute Susan. Susan may need to be unmuted by somebody else. Chris. We're still not getting sound. I think we're going to have to move on now. Yeah, we can share a link to the video.
Yeah, we might need to just move on. Susan, can you please? Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. Sorry about that. You will be able to play it later on because we will distribute the slides in PDF form, so you'll be able to play it later. But basically, the video clip was just giving ideas to why it's important to be part of a profession, why a profession is important to the society at large, because it's regulated. And the Professional Standards Scheme is a form of what's known as a meta-regulation. So basically, there's an association like the ACS that monitors, professional obligations, compliance with those standards of its own members. So it's essentially self-regulation. And then there's this sort of overseeing government regulatory structure over that, which is, for the Professional Standards Council, it's the Professional Standards Scheme. Sorry, Professional Standards Council. Sorry, are you saying you can't hear me? Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. I think Brian was talking about the video, not that.
Okay.
You're fine.
All right,
Anna.
no worries. Okay, great. Thank you. Otherwise, I would look very silly talking with my mouth. But no, sir. Okay, great. So it's a form of meta-regulation. So ACS regulates its own members, and the government, the Professional Standards Councils, regulates the associations, to make sure that we're doing the right thing by promoting continued professional development, for example, professional code of ethics, etc. And then the greater society members benefit from the professionalism of the members. And of course, the participants in the professional standard scheme benefit from the cap liability, which we'll go into a bit further down the track. So you feel, a bit more assured at night when going to sleep, knowing that you've got insurance to protect you, which you should if you're running your own business or if you're a contractor. And of course, we have our umbrella insurance for our members, which is complimentary to your membership as well. So if you want to find out more about that, feel free to ask some questions as well. And then on top of that, you've got the professional standard scheme that will cap your liability. Next slide, please, Susan. So ACS professional standard scheme, in a nutshell, it is one of 17 professional standard schemes that are in existence currently. So lawyers have quite a few professional standard schemes. The Building Society has one. There's some other professions that will have it as well. And Australian Computer Society has one for IT professionals, namely the Certified Professionals of ACS. Now, the objective is to, the government's intention here is to enhance professional standards and consumer protection. The scheme protects its participants by capping civil liability to $2 million per claim, which sounds like a large number, but as you know, claims can sort of rack up depending on what the consequential losses are and so forth. We have been operating a professional standard scheme from 2010, but it's only become sort of mandatory to participate in the last few years. And we've got a new scheme starting on the 1st of January 2025, which will expire after 5 years in 2029. The regulators are professional standards councils, and the scheme is administered by the ACS, which would be sort of like within my team, professional standards scheme team. There's a few professional sort of obligations that scheme participants will need to adhere to, which we'll go into a bit further down the track. Next slide, please, Susan. Now, does everyone need to participate in the professional standards scheme? No. It's only the CP members who are active financial members of the ACS, and everyone has to participate. So it's a catch-all opt-out unless they have circumstances that might qualify for exemption. So the exemption categories are if you're not practicing in the IT industry, or if you're not working at all, for example, or you're only providing internal IT services as an employee. And the rationale there is that, well, it's not consumers at large that may be at risk from unprofessional people. So if you're providing internal services only, there's an exemption. The government employees, because we do have a large sort of section of members who are government employees, so there is a category for them. If you're a lecturer and that's all you do, you're also qualified for an exemption. Now, one other thing is that because the scheme only sort of operates in Australia, it's unique to Australia. If you're working overseas and you're working for a non-Australian entity, then you also qualify for an exemption. The rationale there is that if you're working for an Australian entity, Australian entities can still be sort of, sued in Australia, so that may still be applicable. There's also a sort of catch-all kind of necessary desirable category. So these will be considered by the ACS Professional Standards Board at their discretion. Next slide, please. So I'm seeing some questions pop up. We'll sort of leave them till the end because we do have some time dedicated to Q&As. Now, we've got a Mentimeter question here. So if you can just all scan the QR code and answer the question. As a CP member, if you're an IT employee at a large supermarket with a web development side gig, are you required to participate in the professional standards scheme? So let's just wait until we've had some time to vote there. All right. So the answer is, do you want to show the answer, Sue? Yeah. Okay. So the answer is yes, because there's still some kind of consumer risk because you have a side gig providing external services. So the exemptions only apply if you're solely providing internal services, or you solely work as a lecturer, or you don't work at all, for example. Thank you for voting, everyone. Now, how does it work? So what will happen is that you might get a claim, right? So the first thing that you do is when you see a potential for a claim, you should be speaking to insurer. So they'll get you to fill in a form saying, hey, fill this out. What do you think will happen? And they'll have like an actual form that you need to fill out. You need to put in any sort of claim amount that the person's claimed, etc. So you speak to your insurer, lawyer, and you need to make sure you tell them that you're a professional standard scheme participant. So for the scheme to kick in, and in cases of large claims, to be able to benefit from the cap liability, you need to make sure that you can prove you're a professional standard scheme participant at the time that you provided the IT services, which led to the claim, right? So scheme participation. Secondly, you need to make sure you have, at the time of a claim, that you have a current professional indemnity insurance or multiple policies if you have a layered insurance policy, for example, for large organizations. And thirdly, that professional indemnity insurance policy coverage needs to cover the claim, the current claim that's before you. And the amount that, the limit of indemnity under the insurance policy needs to be at least the cap amount under the professional standard scheme, which for ACS professional standard scheme participants is $2 million, right? So you need to have the insurance that's at least $2 million in coverage. Yeah, that's right, maximum $2 million. So just putting that on a slide here. So Sue, not Susan, Sue, because Susan is a very lovely professional lady. So let's say she's an ACS certified professional member. Until 2023, she did something wrong and things went awry. So in 2025, something happens and there's a massive loss to the client. In 2026, we're going into the future now, but just to demonstrate how this could sort of span out over multiple years, just an example there. So in 2026, the client sues Sue, not Susan, for negligence, claiming that they've lost $5 million. And then they're actually successful because Sue was not very, not a good worker. Now, what do you need to make sure to make sure that the cap applies here? You need to check, okay, because we have multiple schemes, right? Because the scheme expires every 5 years. So we go, okay, which professional standard scheme applies? Because the cap in that previous scheme might be a bit different. That can happen. So we'll go, okay, this happened in 2023. So the scheme that's applicable is the one that ran from 2019 to 2024, which is the current scheme we're in at the moment. And the cap under the current scheme is $2 million. And then you go, okay, back to 2026. Do I have professional indemnity insurance coverage? Yes, my company has a professional indemnity insurance coverage of $3 million. So that's at least the amount of the cap, which is $2 million under this scheme. And then you'll have to make sure you plead all of this in a court proceeding. So the judge will look and go, okay, yes, so you're usually a good professional, as you can tell from being part of the professional standard scheme member, and you've got insurance coverage. The law says that you don't need to pay more than $2 million because you've satisfied all this criteria and you've met your professional obligations and you're able to stay in the scheme, at the time. And then what happens is that, there'll be a judgment for $2 million. The insurer will have to pay $2 million on your behalf because you're covered by insurance, right? So hopefully at the end of this, all you would really need to have to pay is the excess amount under the insurance. So it helps you to mitigate your personal liability as well. Now, what are some of the key benefits of the professional standards scheme? Obviously, we've got the cap liability, but there are sort of more subtle nuances. So, for example, to get a professional standards scheme up and running, the process is quite robust, and the professional standards councils can be quite demanding, right? So we had to demonstrate that we're a good association with good policies, good mechanisms by how we help our members become more professional. We have lots of webinars. We have lots of CPD opportunities for our members. We have a good code of ethics and professional conduct. We monitor our members for professional excellence. So this is why we're introducing a more heightened focus on compliance arrangements as well, which we'll go into a bit later. But in terms of sort of like larger perspective on this, the consumer is protected, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, because as a consumer, you want to be able to sue it as much as you can. But actually, by having the professional standards scheme, and the scheme ensures that the participants have sufficient coverage of up to at least $2 million. To have caps approved by the professional standards scheme, so the $2 million liability cap, we had to have a independent actuarial analysis done of claims history and the claims market within IT profession considered and so forth. So it's not a crazy figure that we've just plucked out and said, look, that should be enough. It's actually, there's some science behind it. So it's actually kind of the council saying that's a sufficient amount of insurance coverage, and therefore it's a sufficient cap liability cap. Anything over is more unusual and something that could definitely affect the viability of insurance going forward, but it's not a usual occurrence. So that's members of professional standards scheme have adequate insurance coverage. So that's good for the consumer side of things, because they know if, they're usually a good professional by virtue of being part of an association that has a professional standards scheme up and running. And also they've got sort of guaranteed adequate compensation should anything go wrong. So that's good from their perspective. And from members' perspective, the addition, so I'm just going to answer that because, there's a question about the additional $3 million that Sue was, Sue stuffed up and had to pay out. So that $3 million is actually sort of wiped off. Like the legislation says, Sue only needs to pay $2 million. That's all they can get. So as you can see that it is a bit of a balance trick that the councils have to do, because if the usual amount of claim is like $10 million, but the cap is set at $1 million, obviously it's not good for the society at large, because the consumer loses out too much, right? But so that example is a bit extreme, but following that example, the $3 million, Sue will not need to pay, the client will be at a loss. So hence the actuarial sort of analysis that goes at the back of it to make sure there's a good sort of balance. If we can just go back to the benefits side. As I was saying, so member benefits, $2 million cap. And it's also a form of recognition by the government that, CP members are a good bunch of people, distinct profession. And member, you can sleep easy at night, as I said, knowing that your liability will be covered if anything does go wrong and the judge does award something against the client. And also in the long-term perspective, if the liability is capped, and so then that actually assists with the prolonged accessibility and viability of insurance, which some of you will have already experienced, because there's all these cybersecurity issues happening out there, and that's really made it difficult to insure for some of our profession. But there are also other professions out there who have really, really, like the building surveyors, have a very difficult time trying to insure themselves, right? So had there been a professional standards scheme earlier on, and a lot of them are actually now part of a professional standards scheme, which I think was only approved this year. Maybe that that could have been sort of helped. So it's good. It's good for the society, and it helps to mitigate professional risk for our members as well, because we've got the auditing under it, and we've got, once we get all the auditing results and stuff, we also analyse it for trends, for example, and turn that into educational initiatives where we think, there's an emerging trend, where there's more of an educational piece that will all come out of the data analysis. Next slide, please. So another question for you. I can see Rupert's doing a very good job managing those questions there. Thank you, Rupert. So choose 2 benefits of participating in the professional standard scheme. There's 3, so this one's not a very difficult one. Yeah, everyone's doing very well. Okay, all right. So the correct answers are the 2. So you get cap liability, and then you get the recognition that you're a part of a distinguished profession. The get out of jail free card for any claims is not quite correct, because you still need to pay out, right? So if you've been negligent, not you generally and personally, obviously, if someone's been negligent and the judge says, well, you're a bad professional at this point in time and you need to pay out X amount, the scheme doesn't get you out of that. You still have to pay $1 million or $3 million or whatever the claim is. However, the scheme is there to help you to cap it at $2 million for the larger claims. So that's the difference there. On to the next slide. So this is about what are some of the professional obligations that you will need to think about and meet while participating in the professional standards scheme. Now, the first up is, excuse me. First up is the continuing professional development and codes of professional ethics and conduct. Now, these are general member obligations, so you all know about this. Well, CPD is only for certified members, but for certified professional members, the CPD is requirement is 30 hours every certification year, right? So every year you need to do at least 30 hours of CPD. You don't have to record it anywhere. You don't have to record it in my ACS portal, but it does actually help to keep it on one place. So I would highly encourage that you use that portal, but you should at least at minimum keep records of what webinars you're attending, what conference you're going, because that's a must. You need to do 30 CPD hours every year. So some of you may have gotten an email from us or phone call from us saying, hey, we're here trying to help you to update your CPD records, because we did run a CPD campaign recently. That wasn't to say that you hadn't done your CPD, but that was just to help you to keep track of your CPD and see if we can help you to load it onto my ACS. I can answer that insurance question later on. I'll have a look. I'll come back to that later. Going on to the next one, disclosure. So being part of the professional standards scheme, sorry, Susan, not next slide. You need to make sure you have a disclosure statement in every business stationery that goes out to existing client or potential clients. Doesn't include your name cards, but anything like letterheads, emails. If you're in South Australia, it needs to be on your website. So it needs to have this disclosure statement, which is actually a legal requirement. So that's a legal prescribed statement. You shouldn't amend that. It needs to appear in your email signature, every email that goes out, for example. The insurance coverage. So you need to, if you're a business owner, you need to make sure you hold the business, so the professional indemnity insurance. If you're an employee, your employer should have the insurance coverage for you, but just check on that. And the PR insurance needs to be at least $2 million, which is the cap under the professional standard scheme. And now, if you know of any sort of circumstances that might turn into a claim, you need to tell us, because all that sort of data helps us to keep track of what's happening out there and what's the emerging trend in terms of risks. What are some of the areas that we need to tell our members about, and also every year the ACS has together an annual report to the professional standards scheme, and one of the reporting requirements is on whether members had any claims, and that's so they can keep their tab on whether the cap amount is sufficient. So you know how I talked about the balance between consumer protection and benefit to the participants, the cap. So there's a balance behind that. So if we find out that there's lots of claims out there and the cap of $2 million isn't sufficient, and that's evidenced by the claims that are sort of being reported to the ACS, then the PSC the councils will say, well, actually, we probably need to change the cap because it's not sufficient from consumer standing point. Next slide, please. So another Mentimeter question here on those professional obligations. If you can pick one of the three that you think might be correct. So current professional indemnity insurance policy coverage is one, volunteering in the community, and the last potential question being cooperation with the new audit if selected as an auditee. Yeah, it's good to see that you've selected audit as an answer, because we'll go into that further. So that's great. All right. So the insurance coverage and audit, helping us with getting the audit done those are correct answers. Volunteering and community, whilst it's a highly noble thing to do, is not a requirement under the professional standards scheme. Next slide, thank you. All right, so what are some of the new compliance arrangements that we are going to start next year? So remember how I said that we're going to have a more heightened focus on compliance. We want to promote the scheme and, make sure that we are make sure that the ACS is doing its job to monitor for compliance and professional excellence. So the first up is the annual compliance declaration. So this is a new process and will be automated with your certification year. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware of when their certification starts and expired. I know it's a little bit confusing because it's different from the actual membership renewal start date. So apologies for that. We are sort of reviewing those different dates, but for now, so your certification year starts at the same time every year, right? So it's usually 1 month after your certification was approved. Now, so every year you will need to do this compliance declaration. If you qualify for an exemption, so for example, if you are a government employee not providing any sort of external services or not doing any side gigs, then you'll be able to apply for an exemption through this process. So it'll be like an online form you fill out, it'll ask you some questions, and then if you'll qualify for an exemption, that should end there. But if you don't qualify and you're actually out there providing external services to clients, then there'll be further questions for you to answer on, what sort of insurance coverage do you have? Have you had any claims in the last year? Do you keep compliant with your CPD obligations? And then maybe a few other questions about premiums, for example, because we want to track how the premiums are going. There could be a really big jump from year to year. So that's really important to check so that we know what's viable and not viable for our members to take out. So there are some kind of quite a few sensitive questions in there. So obviously it'll be done with, it'll be dealt with integrity and a lot of data protection. Sorry, can't speak today. Sorry, data protection around those questions. So if you have any concerns about that at that time, please let us know. The second initiative is the PSS compliance audit. So we'll be auditing 10% of the scheme participants, and this will be selected at random basis. So we're not going to pick on anyone, but it'll be done through a random sampling process. And the auditing components will include CPD, which will probably be done separately from because that's a general certification requirement. No, not scheme specific per se, but the audition will cover things like, all those things that you would have declared in your annual declaration. So your PI insurance. Okay, you said that you've got sufficient PI insurance coverage that's in line with the ACS insurance standards. Sorry, I forgot to mention that there is a document called ACS insurance standards. So the insurance policy has to be sort of compliant with the ACS insurance standards. And you said that you didn't have any claims. Can you, provide us with confirmation from your insurance broker that that's the case, etc. So those are the two sort of initiatives that will start in 2025. Obviously, there might be some kind of, some bits that you're not quite sure about when we started, but, we do have a dedicated professional standards scheme mail inbox. So please inquire with us if you have any questions at that time. Next question. Okay, so this is sort of like the last mentee question for the day. So out of the 5, if you can choose 3 questions that you will need to answer in the declaration. Okay, good. Yes, we're not there yet. Living on Mars, not there yet. Okay, so we've got 5 options here. So the first one, yes, 30 CPD hours. It's a requirement for all certified professional members. The notifications and claims, yes. So we will be asking that question. Have you had any? If so, can you provide us with some details on that? The third option is, are you covered by professional indemnity insurance policy? Yes, that will definitely be a question. Do you work on Mars? Now, this is a bit of a trick question. So we wouldn't be asking that question per se, but we would be asking questions to see, do you live overseas? Are you based in Australia? Do you work for an Australian company? So those questions kind of so it's not a crazy question. Do you work elsewhere than Australia? Yes, we will be asking a question, but that question itself isn't correct. Do you want to opt into ACS PSS? Now, I've said this in the earlier slides, but the professional standards scheme is an opt-out scheme. So catch-all, opt-out if an exemption qualifies. So do you want to opt into ACS professional standards scheme? Was a trick option. So you can't opt in. Everyone is opted in unless an exemption qualifies. Great. Thank you. Hope that wasn't too content heavy and complicated, but we do have a lot of questions. And if we can't cover all the questions, please be assured that we will answer your questions and provide you with the answers after the session.
Anna, I'm going to jump in with, I've been answering as many questions as I can. Some of them I think we might revisit, but one from Steve here, which I thought I'd ask you to comment on, which I haven't put an answer to, and that is about, this is Steve Ardes, does the scheme cover pro bono and volunteering work?
Yes, it does. So the scheme will cover any work that you do that's kind of classified as CP work. So if you're volunteering if you're volunteering as a lawyer, for example, because you happen to be very brainy and you're an IT person and a lawyer, then the ACS professional standards scheme won't cover you. But if volunteering is part of professional services, just not paid, right? So the scheme will cover you. And insurance should also cover, but check your insurance coverage for specific coverage.
Okay. Is there now just Craig Lindley's got a question here. Is the requirement to also have PI insurance new, or is that an existing obligation? I thought we were covered by ACS if we are RSCP. So there's been a few questions around the ACS member insurance and its connection with the scheme. I've answered some of those, but I thought I'd give you, I haven't answered that specific one. I thought I'd give you an opportunity to comment a bit on the connection between those things.
Yes, good question. Yes, so all ACS members do have the benefit of being covered by the ACS umbrella insurance policy. So we've got the errors and emissions insurance policy, which is kind of like professional indemnity insurance. It's a different word. They're technically different, but cover the same kind of thing. So we've got the errors and emissions policy, and there's also a public liability policy. So you get both policies, which are complementary to the ACS membership. For certified professional members, your fee income from non-employment. So non-employment fee income. So maybe you're working for a company as an internal IT services provider, but then you have a side contracting business and you're the only person, or you might have one other person that works with you. Then provided that income from the side gig is less up to $250,000, you've got the coverage of the member insurance policy. For non-CP members, that income threshold is only $125,000 from memory, $125,000. So I think I saw somewhere about $200,000. The cap is $250,000. But and the reason for that is that the member insurance isn't designed to cover everyone. It's to help our members who might be doing a small sort of gig on the side, or members who are starting up. So with ACS member insurance policy, if you qualify coverage under that, then that's fine for scheme purposes. But if you have a larger business, for example, you need to get your own professional indemnity insurance policy. That's at least $2 million in coverage and meets the ACS insurance standards requirements.
Okay, I'm going to ask, just looking at the other questions here. There is a question about the cap, that insurance house, member insurance policy has a $10 million PI insurance level, and yet the cap is being set at $2 million. I've commented that Insurance House has advised that there are costs in addition to claims. Anna, did you want to say some more about that?
Yeah, so you can have a higher coverage of insurance. That's fine, because you might think that, the clients want a higher, which really, yeah. So you might say, okay, out of government contracting sort of tender requirements, I need to have at least $5 million in coverage. Don't know if that's true or not, but as an example. So you can have a higher insurance coverage, but your cap will still be $2 million if anything goes wrong. So
sorry.
Yeah.
Did you want to comment on circumstances when a CP member may apply for an increase in the cap that applies to them?
Yeah, so there is you can get a higher cap. And I've seen this previously in another industry where the client said, well, look, I don't want the cap to apply because not that the member was going to make a mistake that would be more than $5 million, for example, but the client just didn't want the cap there. So they wanted to lift it to $10 million. We do have a way to increase the cap to up to $10 million. However, I would strongly advise taking that option because, you've got a statutory legal protection of a minimum cap of $2 million. So why would you want to lift that to $5 million and be, having to pay $5 million rather than $2 million? So I would strongly advise against that. And I would push back on the client saying, hey, the councils have reviewed all the data they need to set this cap, and it's a legal requirement, no one can contract out of it, that should be sufficient for your purposes. So I would start pushing back on that.
We will be interested in those circumstances. These things are quite complex, and the dynamics of it, we would be interested to know more of, or to see where those sorts of conversations land, and to provide the advice that we can.
Yeah, and if you do have issues with government tenders, we can always try and speak to the government on those issues, because they should be embracing professional standards scheme. It's out there. It's a lot more well known for other industries, but because we haven't really been voicing the scheme much in our industry, they might be very unfamiliar with it. So it's a bit of an advocacy piece that we can work on. So do please let us know if you have trouble with that and you get a lot of pushback.
Our member insurance, of course, does give a preference to CP members in that there's greater coverage. Just want to clarify, because somebody commented on that, Anna, just can you give some brief the general details of the member insurance coverage for CP and non-CP members?
Yeah, I kind of touched up on this, but so every ACS member can take advantage of the ACS member insurance policies, but for certified, but then for non-CP members, there is a much less cap of $125,000 in terms of the fee income that they can get before they're no longer covered by the member insurance. For CP members, it's a higher cap, which is double that, of $250,000. So if you do a side gig, and as long as the annual sort of turnover is less than $250,000, you can rely on the member insurance.
So that cap went up not too long ago, and just noting, because the original levels were mentioned in the chat.
Sorry.
We're doing quite well for time. We've got a few minutes yet to go. And Henry, do help me if there's questions you see that have popped up there I haven't fielded.
Yeah,
no, I think we've covered most of them, Rupert. Yeah.
If you feel I haven't covered something, if you don't mind, or please to repost if I've not answered, if we haven't tucked your question properly. Ask again about, Anna, the circumstances for overseas work, for whether the client is overseas or the individual is overseas, or if someone's doing a bit of both. What's the sort of the test of whether you need to be in scheme or not?
Yeah. So if you're working in Australia and you're providing social services, you have to be in the scheme. But if you're working overseas and you're working for a non-Australian company, you don't need to participate in the scheme. The rationale is that the scheme doesn't apply outside of Australia. So if there's no potential for a claim to be lodged against you, you don't need to be part of it. Overseas members who don't work or reside in Australia, so I think that's the answer. So if you don't work for an Australian company, you can go through you'll still need to do the annual declaration, but your questions will stop at the exemption.
So broadly, if the contract you're working on will or may come under Australian law, then you would need to be in the scheme. And if that's at all, like if ever you're entering into those sorts of activities, and of course if things change and you're entirely working overseas and then it changes to working in Australia, you can change your status with us around the professional standards scheme.
Yeah. We will be updating our professional standards scheme webpage to have more information on it, on the new compliance arrangement, and it will also answer questions like the disclosure statement. So, so there'll be more guidance on what disclosure is required, the statement that I showed you earlier on, and what sort of business station it needs to go on. So you can rest assured there will be more information out there on some of the things that we talked about.
So to Stephen Lau's question, just again restating the working for Australian companies or working overseas. If you're working from Australia, registered here, and you're doing work internationally, you could well get sued under Australian law rather than the law of the international or the overseas law. You'd need to just consider that situation. but also the situation where you may take up work locally at any time, and you might want to therefore comply with the scheme so that's covered when those times come.
Yeah.
There's a recurrent question, which I'll just restate so that you can answer it. I think I've answered this already, and that is around the will CP members be able to witness Commonwealth documents and passport renewals like accountants, bank workers, teachers, doctors? There's also various state government witness registers. And did you want to comment on that?
Sorry, I'm not quite getting the question. Is
it
witnessing?
It's a different law, but there are those lists that allow people to be witnesses to documents under various state and federal jurisdictions. It's not connected with professional standards scheme, but there's been a few questions around whether that will change that situation.
Jeff, did you want to jump in about this?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yes, I do know what we're talking about here. It's people that are able to sign statutory declarations. This is something that we have looked at. We are definitely looking to get certified professionals onto this. The next time that we have an opportunity to apply for it is actually in 2026. We'll be starting the preparation work for that in 2025. It is on the list to be done. So everyone who's thinking, gee, we really should be another one of the many professionals. In fact, I think we're the only professional organisation that can't sign statutory declarations. We do have it in play. It's not forgotten, but at the moment, there's nothing we as an organisation can do because the government organisation that manages it hasn't allowed for more applications. We are going to do it when it comes up. So yes, we have it in play. Very important to all of us, by the way. So yes, thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Jeff. There's a question from Ashley Boland. Is there a list of insurers on the website we should be aware of? So no, but we'll take that question on notice. What we do have is insurance standards that we and you are required to comply with under the scheme, and those that can be a very useful standard to present to your insurer or broker because it tends to be a list of the things you ought to want in your insurance policy anyway. Dan, do you want to comment some more on that?
Yeah, so we don't have a list of brokers, for example, but the broker for our member insurance policy is Insurance House, and the underwriter is Liberty. So feel free to speak to Steve Rawlings, who is the manager of our member insurance policy at Insurance House. We can provide you details if you like. But outside of Insurance House, you can go to any broker who's an authorised insurer to practice in Australia, basically.
We are talking to cyber insurers at the moment, clearly an era of essential insurance and also some challenge in terms of getting insurances or getting affordable insurance. We'll have some more advice on that soon. But we won't be prescribing you we won't be telling you that your insurer is no good, you can't use that insurer. But what can happen is the conditions of insurance may be unsuitable and may not meet the insurance standards. They can change a lot from one insurance to another or policies. It's a little hard to say that one insurer complies and another doesn't. But it is possible to ask for your insurer or broker to be sure to include those things in your policy. So sorry, we'll have more published advice on this soon.
I'm seeing some questions that we haven't quite covered, so I'll just quickly answer some of them. So if you're a lecturer in university, you can apply for exemption through the annual declaration process, so you don't have to participate in the scheme. And then there was one about the defence requiring $20 million coverage. That's very high. So I would be interested to hear more on that, if that's a requirement, because that's 10 times the cap amount, for example, under the scheme. So I think even Professional Standards Council might go, oh, that's a very large number, but we'd love to hear more about that. Disclosure statement, we'll be publishing more information on that. Yeah, $10 million coverage is very high as well. Yeah, there'll be further information on the annual declaration and what we'll cover. It will start next year when your new certification year starts. So that's different for each of you, depending on when you're certified.
There's a question about IP3, and I'll just pop a link to IP3 in the chat. ACS IP3 comes from IFIP, and Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong. And IP3 provides a means of mutual recognition between certain overseas and Australian bodies. The ACS has been accredited with the IP3, which means that our certification assessment and standard is compliant with those from certain other countries in which it's therefore recognised. So it's not connected with the professional standards scheme, albeit that somebody coming from overseas with a certification can readily get CP with us without necessarily going through the full assessment process.
There's a question on the is there a difference between the current scheme and the new scheme? In terms of the scheme cap, is still the same, $2 million. So, and in terms of compliance arrangements, we're putting more focus on that. So that's the difference. There is a new ACS insurance standards, which is a lot more comprehensive than one that we had previously. So we'll shortly publish that as well. And in the new year, what we'll also be looking at is to sort of extend the scheme further out to include entities to participate. Because as we know, in some industries, individual employees are sued. Property valuers, for example, even if they work for a big company, they do tend to get sued individually because their name's on the valuation report. But in IT, that's not so much. So having just an individual-based professional standards scheme, there's a bit of a gap there. So we are going to look at introducing amendment to the 2025 scheme to include entity participation. So keep an eye out for that. So what we'll do now is, we'll make sure we write down all the questions that we haven't quite answered, and we might create like a little FAQ, and we'll make that available on the web page. And this recording will be made available as well. You will get an email with a little survey, and it'll have a link to the YouTube video of this recording as well. And we'll also send out the slides for you to have a look.
Thank you, Anna. There was a question on the slides, so I was hoping you were going to mention that also, not only the recording but the slides. Thank you all for attending. We've had a terrific response and attendance today. We're really, really pleased. This is about us reaching out, and all of your questions. None of your questions are annoying. They're all very informative, however, because the things that you ask are things that are the things that we need to be sure to communicate. So part of the exercise today was we really wanted to hear back, and so really thank you for all those questions and responses. And if there are other things you think of, please go to our PSS email address and or check in on the website and find that link. We'd really like to hear back from you and to hear the market dynamics that we may need to understand and adjust to. So thank you all for your interest and attendance. And like Jeff, as with Jeff, we are very excited to be at this point to have this scheme approved and to be now working with you to implement. Jeff, any final words? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
No, not at all. So thank you very much, team. Absolutely fabulous. I very much appreciate the efforts today. Thank you to everyone for attending. Any questions, of course, we're here to help you. And we're looking to continue expanding and growing this. So very excited with what we're going to do with the next few years of professional standards as well. So again, everyone, thank you.
Thank you all. We'll sign off.
Thank you.